listening to The Clock and Talk, an Arsenal podcast. I am your host, Schwinn, and Tez is once again not joining us. He had a late fitness test yesterday, as Tony asked him, and it seems like he's still struggling with his bout of illness. But we'll get cracking on anyway, and I'm joined by our favorite gooner on the podcast, Tony. How are you doing, Tony?
Such kind words. I wouldn't go with favourite, especially for some of the comments I get some weeks. But yeah, I'm good, and I'm a lot better after yesterday's result. Quite unsurprisingly, I guess.
Well, we like to spread love to people who get the most hate. So since you're the ones who's always interacting with, our followers and our listeners, you get a lot of shit. But I want to get stuck in with this game because no one expected this, did they? I mean, let's get stuck in and get started with the lineup.
I said last week I would have probably liked to see us go to a back five. But we didn't. It was just because I was worried about Chambers at right back as an attacking force. I don't really have too many worries with him defensively. And every time I say that, people go, "Oh, what about Jefferson Montero?" But you could pick any defender in the world, the best defenders ever, and find one player or one instance where an individual's given them trouble. You could go, Vidic for me was probably one of the best defenders in the Premier League, or definitely in the last 15 years. But you could go, but what about Fernando Torres? I'm not comparing Montero or Chambers to Vidic and Torres, but it's kind of a similar situation in that Chambers had a nightmare at right back once and everyone's sort of written him off since. And so for me, I don't worry about him defensively. It's going forward, I don't think he offers much. So that was my reasoning for probably wanting to play a back five. But beyond that, once you settle with a back four, I think the team pretty much picked itself. I was surprised in the shape a little bit where Jack was largely playing at 10 with Ozil on the right but drifting in. I think that's another thing that doesn't particularly help Chambers, having no one ahead of him when he gets the ball. And it's an issue Hector Bellerin has a lot when he plays there as well. But personnel didn't overly surprise me. Shape probably did a little bit.
I want to talk about Chambers a little bit because over the last 2-3 weeks it seems like, I wrote him off completely after one of the dismal performances. But I have to say, yesterday, apart from a couple of defensive errors, which could have costed us, but they didn't, his technique on the ball yesterday was phenomenal, wasn't it? In terms of finding passes, in terms of when passes were supposed to be played, he was very patient on the ball. Is that something that caught your eye at all?
Well, I don't know how much people saw of him before we signed him, but he was always seen coming through as a ball-playing centre-back, and he played at right-back when he was young because he wasn't seen as physically having the strength to play at centre-back at 17, 18, 19 years old. But because he was good on the ball, they felt he could do a job at right-back. So seeing him playing, like being good with the ball, didn't really surprise me. I remember in his first year here, obviously, this was years ago, so I wasn't involved with this podcast, and I didn't really hear views of fans abroad because I just wasn't involved in that sort of thing. But a lot of the English fans over here wanted to see him play sort of defensive midfielder because they thought he's a defender, he's quite big, and he's good on the ball. So to see him be good on the ball yesterday wasn't really much of a surprise. It's kind of what we expected when we signed him.
Yeah, I think yesterday was when I sort of really started noticing it. Maybe I've not given him the benefit of the doubt earlier, but he won perhaps every air duel that he was involved in. He was our outlet ball a lot of times for Ospina when we were being pressurized. And all in all, I think he had a very solid game. I don't want to say his best game in an Arsenal shirt because, to be honest, I don't really remember a lot of other games in which he's been good. I'm sure there have been, but I was really impressed by him. We've spoken about expectations versus reality a lot, and we'll get to the man of the match topic in not too long. But it just felt like, in terms of what you expect from Callum and what he delivered yesterday, I think he should be involved in the conversation for man of the match just by that measure, not for anything else. But we move on for now.
Just one thing I'm glad you mentioned, and I kind of want to highlight it because it's something that does my head in. You mentioned about him winning a lot in the air, and when Sanya was our right back, obviously we want to play short from goal kicks or when the ball's in the keeper's hands to try and build up the football. But when we got boxed in, we always went long to Sanya, and you knew he was going to win probably 60-70% of headers. That idea seems to have just completely gone since Sanya's left, and we just end up booting it to whoever, and a lot of the time it's Ozil for some reason, and obviously we know he doesn't really want a challenge in the air and isn't the best at it anyway. And I think yesterday, maybe we were forced to because we had that centre-back hire at right-back. We went back to, when in trouble, hit our tall player who's probably going to be up against their winger and would be expected to win it the majority of the time. It's something I'm surprised we haven't seen us do more when Kolasinac has been playing on the other side, because let's face it, he's a big guy and most wingers won't fancy a 50-50 with him in the air. So it's something I wish we would go back to and I wish we would see more of, and I hope that wasn't just a one-off.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've been giving the ball away, in those instances instead of hitting long and trying to find someone who's willing to duel in the air. But I think Kolasinac, despite his size, is also not very convincing in the air. I think that's one of the reasons. Of course, he hasn't even been playing. This is more out of injury that he's been forced into the lineup. But I think we've tried to hit Montreal a few times to try and retain possession. But I think Callum really made a name for himself yesterday when it came to getting us out of those sticky situations. And I think he deserves a shout-out for that. But let's move on and let's quickly talk about the Milan team before we, start assessing the different facets of the game. I thought this would be a good moment for us to just get words on how you thought about their performance for the whole 90, and were you surprised in the lack of quality, for a lack of a better word, from their side?
I don't know. Look, I don't watch bundles of Italian football, as we've discussed before. So a lot of the players I'd either only seen in passing or only really heard of but never really seen, or seen them at other clubs and heard fans talk about them. So I was kind of going into this not knowing what to expect. And the same with Gattuso as a manager. It's like I couldn't tell you what his managerial style was because as I said, I've not watched Milan in the last however many games he's been in charge. And before that, he's been a nothing manager. He's had lower league Italian clubs or Milan youth side. So I couldn't tell you his style either. So anything I saw from Milan was going to surprise me. I thought that this may come in for some criticism because people moan about Wenger for this, but I thought Gattuso showed absolutely zero tactical nous. He didn't respond to what Arsenal were doing at all. It's like the criticism we have of Arsenal a lot of the time, in that we say, we're going to play this way, and regardless of what the other team do, we're going to play like this. And I think that's what Milan done. So it was difficult for them because it looked initially like it was going to be a 4-3-3 for them so it'd be 3-on-4 at the back, and in the middle they were hoping to sort of match us up. But where we had Mkhitaryan, who's comfortable not as a centre midfielder, but comfortable receiving the ball in the middle of the pitch. Jack was playing at 10, but again, he's more of a centre midfielder. Ozil playing wide, but again, very comfortable picking the ball up in the middle. It was almost like 5v3 in there every single time. And they just didn't react to that. And also, their three, Biglia, we know, likes to sit deep, win the ball and give it, but you're not worried about him making a nice splitting pass. And then Kessie, however you say it, was more of an athlete. So when he did get the ball, we had usually people around him because we had a lot of bodies and we outnumbered him in that area. And he's not the best footballer, so if he couldn't run with it, he was in trouble. In all fairness to him, when we did allow him to turn and run, I thought he looked quite dangerous. But he just wasn't brilliant with the ball at his feet. And then Bonaventura, I thought, looked quite good. And again, it's someone I've not really seen. But he it's a criticism we hear of Aaron Ramsey a lot. Bonaventura seemed to empty the midfield. So where they thought they'd be matching us up 3-on-3, it almost ended up like 5-on-2. And they were just completely outnumbered, didn't react to it. Suso and Çalhanoğlu, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, didn't help because they were trying to provide width by staying on the touchlines. And it's something, when we spoke to Michael the other day, I said, to help combat us, will them two tuck in and expect width from the fullback? And he said yes, but they didn't do that at all. They both hugged the touchline pretty much, so it left it as 5v2. And if they did get the ball forward, then they may have been three attackers on 4 defenders, but they couldn't get the ball out of that midfield with 5-on-2 pretty much every time.
I'm glad you spoke about the midfield because something that I noticed, and maybe it's just us Arsenal fans being in a well right now, is that I want to give more credit to for this performance to the lack of AC Milan's quality than to our incision, if that makes sense. I thought them being as bad as they were on that day magnified how good we were. I mean, I thought in the first half we were really good. I thought we held the tempo and were able to absorb all the pressure that they offered. The second half was a different story in my mind, and of course we'll go into the granular stuff, but from a general perspective, I want to say, and I don't want to take credit away from the boys, but I do want to say that this result would not have been the same if a decent AC Milan team with a decent plan, or a plan at all, was the one who was facing us. Would you agree with that?
It's difficult to say because, I mean, the way to combat what we done yesterday would have been fill the midfield also. So get Suso tucking in. I mean, with the players they had on the pitch, get Suso tucking in, get Çalhanoğlu tuck in, get Bonaventura to stay deep. And then that would have left Cutrone. I'm saying it with the accent because I like the way Michael said it the other day.
I love it.
It would have left him completely isolated. And I don't know a lot about him, but from what I saw yesterday, he didn't have anything that was a huge bother for the defenders. He wasn't going to outstrength them. He wasn't going to outrun them. He link-up play didn't look amazing. He wasn't brilliant in the air. So if they would have matched to combat us and gone a 5 actually staying in the middle, I think it would have left him very, very isolated. And I'm not sure if he is up to that job. I know a lot of us, and I know we're going to get onto him deeper later, will criticise Danny Welbeck, but the difference is if they would have matched us 5v5 in midfield and left Welbeck isolated, we could have hammered it into the channel. You know full well that Welbeck's going to beat most people to the ball or out-muscle them. And as much as technically he's not very good, he does have a skill set that bothers defenders. I say skill very loosely because I do not mean skill with football. But he has a skill set that bothers defenders, whereas Cutrone, his goal-scoring record this season is obviously very good, but he didn't look like he had the play, the attributes to bother the defenders. So I think if they would have matched us up in the middle, I mean, I don't know if the result would have been any different, but I think they would have struggled to mount any attacking threat.
I think Cutrone had one chance very early in the match when Callum Chambers was forced wide, and he tried to clear the ball, but the ball fell to Rodriguez, who found Cutrone, and he was right on goal, but he hit it wide. I think that's the only...
He toe-punted it in the near side net, and that was when Mustafi went for a random walk for no apparent reason.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. But let's not get into all of that, and let's get into the positives. 15 minutes in, Kolasinac is surging forward. He loses the ball, but is retrieved by Wilshere, who finds Ramsey, who finds Ozil, and then finally to Mkhitaryan. Very composed. A slight bit of deflection on the ball, but of course we'll take it. Henrik Mkhitaryan's first goal. Many more to come?
Playing like we did yesterday, you can see him scoring a few because it was... Again, I hate saying this, but anyone who's ever played, and I don't mean to any level, but anyone who's played football, especially if they've played as a defender, when you have no one to mark, it's an absolute nightmare. You'd think if you don't play, it's easy, you've got no responsibility. But that's also the opposite. Like, no one knew who to pick up for the Milan defenders yesterday because Welbeck drifts out wide, Mkhitaryan just turns up sort of wherever, as does Ozil. Jack, we didn't really know his role yesterday. He stayed in 10 most of the time, but they were probably expecting him to drop deeper. Ramsey's going to run from late. I said this last week on the podcast. I'm still not sure if I like that. I have absolutely no idea where Mkhitaryan's going to turn up. Because, as Kevin Campbell said a few weeks ago, we play off the cuff attacking-wise, and it can be a nightmare to defend against. But it leaves us a bit exposed defensively with if a fullback goes surging on, then Mkhitaryan may be over the other side of the pitch at that moment of time. But going back to what you said, yeah, if we play like that, he probably will get more goals because he's got no one watching his runs. Because if he's technically started on the left but drifted over to the right, the left back isn't going to... I mean, their right back isn't going to drift over to the other side of the pitch. And it's not a case of just saying, the right back will take him now, because it could be a case of you have Ozil, Jack and Mkhitaryan over there. And then do the centre-back shift out? Do the centre midfielder shift over that side and then leave the middle of the pitch empty? It really is a nightmare to defend against that type of player. Yeah,
I think you're right. It's one of those things that when they work, it works really well. but it's just a matter of how often we can make it work, because obviously in the last few weeks it's been very hard for us to get ticking and to be able to maximize our potential. One thing I wanted to touch upon, because I was watching a BT Sport stream, and Robbie Savage was on, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one incident early in the first half? This was before the first goal, so I'm sort of backtracking here. But Çalhanoğlu was racing towards the ball. This was on the edge of the box, and Ospina charged out, and there was sort of a coming together. Ospina made very little contact. Credit Çalhanoğlu, who stayed on his feet as the ball trickled for a goal kick. Now, I remember Savage saying at that point that he should have taken the contact, ridden the challenge, and gone to ground as to win a penalty. Quick thoughts on that sort of advice being given by a former player who, let's not forget, is being heard by thousands of prospective footballers of the future. What would you make of those comments?
Probably quite controversially, I'll make him right. There is no benefit to Çalhanoğlu jumping over the keeper. He's put himself at a disadvantage in terms of trying to get the ball to avoid contact. For me, if he carries on running a straight line, Ospina contacts him, is a foul, they get the penalty. I think we get confused sometimes, not confused, but get between diving, and it's not an attacker's job to avoid contact. If someone makes a challenge, it's not the attacker's job to get out of the way. And a lot of times, if Çalhanoğlu would have just carried on running into Ospina, people might have said, he's made the contact, he's dived. But nowhere in the rules does it say, if a player's in your way, you have to avoid them at all costs. And I think that's what Savage is getting at. I don't think he's saying he should have dived, because, as I said, if he wouldn't have jumped, if he'd have just carried on running in a normal motion, he would have got fouled. And it's not a dive, it's a foul. So I make Savage right. And I know there was I don't know if you got the punditry at half time where they were saying, this is what's wrong with the rules. The referee, he stayed on his feet and the referee didn't give anything. Well, the referee couldn't, because there actually wasn't contact. But that was due to Çalhanoğlu's choice. If he wanted there to be contact, there would have been contact. So I think we're getting into a bit of a murky waters between diving and avoiding contact. As I said, I think that would have just purely been a foul. I don't think it would have been a dive if he wouldn't have changed what he was doing in order to miss Ospina. Interestingly, before that, and I've only seen it back once, and the commentators didn't mention it, but Mkhitaryan went down our left outside Calabria, and there was a little bit of contact, and that he got to the byline and cut it back, and nothing came of it. But I also think if he would have went down then, it would have been a huge shout. And nothing was made of it, because I think it was only 2 or 3 minutes before the Çalhanoğlu incident. But as a fan, as soon as I saw the player touched him, Mkhitaryan I'm talking about, I said, go down. It's not a dive. When you're touched, the onus isn't on you to have to stay on your feet. Obviously, there is times when it gets to a joke where someone touches someone's shoulder and they dive head first and their feet end up 6 feet in the air.
The Dele Alli syndrome, you mean?
Yeah. But the onus isn't on the attacker to stay up when they don't have it, especially when it causes a disadvantage to them.
Yeah, no, in fact, I meant to bring that up as well, because I felt I wanted to shout at the referee at one point, I think deep in the second half, when there was a free kick given away against Aaron Ramsey. And I just wanted to, jerk the ref around for a second and tell him that it's a contact sport. If someone falls, it's not necessarily a foul. It could be a foul, but there were instances where, people are challenging for a 50-50, and of course, because of a collision, the ball would go one way and both of them would fall on the ground. And it felt to me that the ref was just giving fouls when there was someone on the ground, falling onto the ground. But one thing, speaking of fouls, that reminded me yesterday is that we can still do rotational fouling a little bit. I didn't think we had it in our locker, and I think we did a very good job of snuffing out those attacks very early on by throwing at least one player at the ball carrier and nullifying the attack. Did you notice that at all? Yeah,
but I think we have a part as fans. I think we are part of the problem in this, and pundits and journalists. the amount of times watching football, as aside, if I wasn't an Arsenal fan, I think Xhaka makes excellent fouls. And then, like, we'll be sitting at the game and I'll be sitting with friends or people I know, and some people around me are very knowledgeable about football and other people are clueless. But he'll make a foul and the few people I'd class as knowledgeable go, yeah, great foul. And others will go, oh, for fuck's sake, Xhaka's fouling again. And I'll come on Twitter and you'll get, again, the same responses. Some people go, oh, he's given away another foul. Or you see pundits going, oh, that's Xhaka's 10th foul of the game. I think it's all about areas. And I think we, as I said, as a fan base and as pundits and as the media in England, love to criticise for that when, as I say, I applaud it. If you foul in the right area, and as you said, if it broke up attacks early, especially, as I said earlier, they were pretty much leaving 3-on-4 at the back, as in their 3 attackers against our 4 defenders. So if you break that attack up early, you get time to get everyone or at least 10 men behind the ball. And then it's not 3-on-4 anymore, it's 9v9, which is a lot harder to score, even though the numbers are equal, because you know their defenders aren't going to go pushing up and steaming into our area.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because it feels like we like to play the game the right way. And as much as I love that, certain things are overlooked in the real world. And when you have that as an option, I think you should take it up, because it not only breaks up the play, but it really frustrates the opposition. You know, they'll start getting into verbal tussles with the referee. They might pick up a booking here or two, and I mean the inquantifiable, value of something like that is very important, and I was really happy to see some of our players do that yesterday. Let's fast forward to the end of the first half, and I'm just going to let you take it from here because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
The goal, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Again, to be honest, I thought that came at a time when we probably lost a bit of the control. In terms of in that 4-minute stoppage time, it was end to end. I think we had a chance. When Mickey hit the bar, it was either in the stoppage time or very close to it, I believe. But then they went and they didn't. They had the where Suso crossed it and Koscielny got the flick on to take it over Bonaventura, where he would have pretty much, you would have assumed he would have scored it had Koscielny not got that touch. And then we went down the other end. And I think it was maybe a bit naive from them to just, they were playing like it was a cup tie and it was the last minute of the game. Like they emptied the pitch, and we've obviously, I don't think we reacted, and I think we got a bit lucky because when Koscielny got that flick, I think it was maybe 3-on-3 in the area, which obviously you never want. But yeah, we got away with it, and then we've gone down the other end, and they were still attacking, and there was loads of space, which is criminal against us. And again, speaking to Michael the other day, I said, will they have a plan for Ozil? Because if you give him time and space, you're going to have issues. And he said, yep, no doubt, there'll be someone on him. They'll make sure he doesn't find that space. And look, Ozil's a very good and very intelligent player, and he can find space. But for that second goal, he didn't need to find the space. The space found him. I think they just left him, which is criminal. I'm surprised. I'm assuming it wasn't because no one said anything. But Danny's control, I'm surprised no one shouted for handball. Even if it wasn't. My initial thought, I thought handball. And even they didn't appeal for it, but like the way everything seemed to be in slow motion, I thought the ref would give it or something. But yeah, then you allow Ozil that time and space, and you do it at your peril. Brilliant run from Ramsey. Again, running from deep, and where they'd empty midfield, they had no one to go with him. And an excellent finish. And I don't mean the motion of kicking the ball in the goal, but sitting Donnarumma down and just tapping it in. He was onside just. But yeah, I thought it was quite amateur from them, to be honest. But quality football from Arsenal. Yeah,
even the slight flick that actually got the ball into Welbeck was beautiful. And there's a video making the rounds on Twitter that focuses the camera on Ramsey, and you can see him holding his run as he's anticipating the ball. Of course, if you're in space, Mesut Ozil will find you, and that's exactly what Mesut did. And as you said, brilliant finish. I mean, to have the composure and to have, that sort of presence of mind that, yep, I'm just going to be able to do this because I'm Aaron Ramsey. I can score, goals in big games and sit 19-year-old world-class goalkeepers. So I don't mind that at all. And I didn't expect it. I mean, to be honest, I was on Twitter maybe around the 40, maybe 2 minutes into stoppage time. And of course, I was watching on the internet. So my stream was a little behind. And I saw an Arsenal tweet pop up, goal by Aaron Ramsey. And I was like, fuck me. Every time I hop on Twitter, I get to miss the goal. But you know what? I'll take it. And I thought it was the nail in the coffin, I would say, because Milan offered nothing in the first half. They had a lot of crosses. They had a lot of half chances. But they never really seemed to threaten. I don't remember a single instance where David Ospina was tested.
They didn't have a shot on target in the first half.
There you go. So for all the crosses, and I think one in particular that was very early in the first half that sort of whizzed past the front post. Other than that, I don't really remember anything, and I think the stats back that up. So let's move on to the second half, since we've pretty much touched upon everything from the first. What do you think changed? Do you think we just sat back and sort of saw what Milan were going to offer, or do you think we were more careful in terms of our attack, in terms of sending players forward and not to empty our midfield?
Yeah, well, that's literally, you've used the phrase I was gonna use. I don't think we emptied the midfield at all. I think we aimed to play on the break, knowing that they were going to push 10, 15 yards further forward. We aimed to control the ball. I know it was with about 10 minutes ago, and I assume it finished that way, that they had more possession, but it was all pretty much controlled possession. I think the only chance I can remember them having was Bonaventura, which was after about 5 minutes of the second half, when he should have done better. I mean, the commentators were going, he has to score. I don't put it down as that much of a gilt-edged chance. He has to hit the target, and if it goes in the corner, you score, but it's not. The ball was coming across him at pace. He should have done better. He should have hit the target, but I don't see that as like a you have to score chance. But apart from that, they didn't really create much. We sat deeper. We doubled up on Sousa because you know what he's going to do, and he is quite tricky. Obviously, they then changed shape, which I think in a way played into our hands, because where they were having most of possession and trying to build up along the floor, they then put Kalinic on, who's a bigger guy, and then not long after bring out Andre Silva on again, who's big, decent in the air. Mm-hmm. And again, they may have been having possession, but it was much less controlled, going longer, hoping for flick-ons. And when you're doing that, it can work, but I think it's more you're hoping for something to work rather than a planned tactical build-up. It's sort of like, we'll go long, hopefully win the first header and see what happens from there. And I think they were much less controlled once that happened. The only chance they had was when Silva played it through to Kalinic, and it was a slight defensive mistake from two players, Holding and Mustafi. But again, if you don't expect Kalinic to be outrunning you, and Ospina beat him to it, but it wasn't a chance where they had a shot on target.
Speaking of substitutions, what do you make of ours? I mean, Kolasinac was obviously subbed off because of what seemed like a cramp or an injury. I don't know what exactly is the news on him. I'll try and find something while you're responding to this. And of course, we brought on. Who else did we bring on? I forget. Holding was another one.
And El Neni.
El Neni, that's right, on the right once Callum Chambers pulled up. So what'd you make of those substitutions?
Yeah, so Kolasinac, to be honest, he just looked like he was knackered. He tried to come off about 5 minutes before he actually did. They took a corner short, and Suso went to go down the line, and he outstrengthened him, and we got a goal kick. And at that point, he was like, "Oh, I'm feeling this a bit." And then the very next time, it was a ridiculous booking, by the way, that he got, and ridiculous in terms of he should never have been booked, not as in he was stupid. But yeah, as soon as that happened, he signalled to the bench. So yeah, Maitland-Niles came on there. That was the obvious one. Then we had a break. I can't remember who it was. It may have been Chambers. Someone crossed it from the right. They overhit it, and Welbeck chased it down, and the ball would have came to Ozil, but Welbeck fouled him, I think unintentionally. And you just saw Ozil's head go, not head go, but he had that look where it's like, oh, for fuck's sake, what is this? And watching it, I thought, well, he's coming off here. Ozil's frustration is that we would have kept the ball, but you have to, you know what I mean? That's a team performance where you're 2-0 up 10 minutes to go, or however long it was, you have to dig in. Especially
again, with the game on Sunday, where we probably need him to be as fit as possible, right?
Yeah, and looking at the bench, I was surprised. In a way, I was surprised it was holding, but where they had just gone two big men up front, and rather than playing one up front, which they had done for the whole game, they'd gone two up front. Going to a five at the back wasn't the worst option. I was quite surprised that they slotted Holding in on the left. But then I suppose if Suso's going to cut inside on his right, then cut inside Maitland-Niles on his right. You've got two right-footed players there, which probably helps a little bit. And then El Neni was, to be honest, the only option. I think when Chambers pulled up with cramp, you're looking at the bench and it's obviously not going to be Nketiah. Do you trust Nelson playing at right wing back in the San Siro with 10 minutes to go when he hasn't played there for months? I think El Neni was probably the sensible choice, and he done quite well when he came on. Nothing spectacular. Got a free kick given against him, which was an absolute joke. But yeah, kept the ball, just kept us ticking over. So I think our subs were, two of them were born out of necessity in terms of the wing or the fullbacks as they were. Kolasinac and Chambers going off were both born of necessity. And then Ozil, as I said, he gave him the opportunity to take him off, and where they just changed shape. I think had they not changed shape, it would have been El Neni that came on, just to add an extra body in the middle. But it was I think it was quite proactive from Wenger, thinking they've changed shape. So now they've got two strikers on two centre-backs. Let me react to that by making it three centre-backs, so we've got the extra man again.
Yeah, I was going to say that the fact that the change that was not forced upon him was perhaps my favorite change, which was Holding for Ozil, because we needed that sort of extra man in our defense, and to see him and to use your word proactive with his changes, I thought was very, very vigilant from our manager. I've just pulled up the team news for this weekend here on Arsenal.com, and Kolasinac has an ankle problem according to our website. He's not ruled out from Sunday yet, but there is a possibility that he will be out. As for Callum Chambers, he should be okay as well. Nacho Monreal and Hector Bellerin are not 100% yet. Monreal might be available for our home tie against Milan, and Lacazette should be out with training soon, but he will be available only after the international break. So there's some quick team news for all our listeners. Let's move forward, Tony, and talk about Mesut Ozil, because Tez always likes us to do an Ozil watch. And I would characterize this as a big game, not because the Europa League is big, but because right now where we are as a football club, this is our biggest stage where we need to perform. And I know he had 2 assists, and we expect that from Mesut Ozil, but what did you see from him on the field when he was not providing that killer pass, when he was not trying to do things he's good at and trying to contribute in other facets of the game?
I think with Ozil, he's always a nightmare to play against because of the positions he takes up. And again, people obviously always call him lazy, but you only have to look at the distance ran to realise he's on the move pretty much all of the time, which makes him an absolute nightmare to defend against. It's very rare that you see a one-on-one where a defensive midfielder is tasked with just tracking Ozil, because he's on the move so much that it's a very difficult job to do. I think he kept the ball ticking over, and he took up excellent positions. He was clinical in the 2 times it mattered. Also, I think it was still 0-0 at the time, where he played a ball wide, a very good ball wide to Chambers, but Chambers was still in the area. I say wide, but it was wide of Ozil. And Chambers crossed it in, and it deflected, and it just went over Welbeck's head. Chambers tried to slide the ball along the floor, and it deflected. Had it not, I think Welbeck would have had a tap in. So I think Ozil was clinical in the areas it mattered, but I wouldn't class this as the type of games we've seen before where he's ran the show. I think he was just very good whilst pretty... it sounds weird. I think he was very good whilst pretty quiet, but very good in the moment that matters. As I said, he just kept the ball ticking over, didn't do anything spectacular. The ball for Ramsey's goal, I think you'd pretty much expect him to make 99 times out of 100. The ball for Mkhitaryan's goal was excellent, especially first time, the vision, to play the ball pretty much perfectly. I think if you'd have said to Mkhitaryan, where do you want this ball? He got it where he would have wanted it. But I've seen better from Ozil, and it's not a criticism. I thought he was very good, but it's not a one-man show, ran the show, like it was maybe against Tottenham at home.
So I'm guessing by that measure, he was not exactly your man of the match.
No.
You want to share who he was then?
Yeah, mine is probably quite controversial, especially looking on Twitter. I thought it was Danny Welbeck comfortably. And again, I'm going to quantify that by saying, once you accept that he's not the best footballer and realise what he does give you rather than moaning about what he doesn't give you, I think you start to appreciate him a lot more. And no, this is not me saying he should start every week, he should be our number one striker. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying in this particular match, he gave us more than any others in a sense that all of our players that are on the pitch like the ball to feet. If all of your players do that, it's very easy to defend against. Where he was that different option, where he's quick, he's strong, he's decent in the air in terms of winning flick-ons and stuff. I'm not saying he's a danger from crosses, but he's decent in the air. He gave us that extra option. His pressing was excellent. He gave their defence a nightmare because he kept going out wide where he was going to outrun their fullback all day, but the fullback didn't really know what to do because obviously he's a striker. He should be on the centre-back. But he's not. So Bonucci isn't going to go out to the wing with him. And I think it shows as well that Bonucci last year was seen as a Rolls Royce of a defender. I know things haven't gone brilliantly for him at Milan, and I've not seen a lot, so I can't really comment on that. But most Milan fans will say in the last few weeks he's got his act together and he looks like the Bonucci of old. Welbeck gave him an absolutely torrid time because Welbeck was a lot quicker, a willing runner. He stopped Bonucci playing out as comfortably as he would have liked. And I think, as I said, I don't see a lot of Italian football, but I think that's the sort of stuff they're not used to. When people say the intensity of the British game is different, it probably is. But in the middle of the pitch, you're never going to get loads of time, no matter where you play, unless you're against a team that are completely parking the bus with no ambition. I think especially there and in Spain, the defenders get a lot of time on the ball, and Bonucci can look brilliant because he can pass the ball given time. But where Welbeck stopped that, it was literally the first line of defence. Said he ran Bonucci into channels, he beat him in the air on occasion. He just gave everyone a torrid night work, and he also gave us a different option. Yes, I know he kicked the floor, or he had that shot that didn't even make it off for a goal kick, and the option would have been better to pass. He missed a one-on-one. I actually don't think it was a bad effort. I think it was a good save. He may have televised where he was going to go, but in all honesty, I think most right-footers running at that angle would have tried to open their body and go across goal. I think Donnarumma predicted it and made a good save. So, I mean, yeah, it's a miss, but I don't think that's... I think he'd probably not done all he could because he could have scored, but he didn't do a bad job. But yeah, for me, he was man of the match just for giving us something completely different. As I said, if we'd have had a striker that came short and gave us the ball and AC Milan wouldn't have had to worry about going in behind, then their defenders would have stepped up 10 yards. So where I was saying it was 5-on-2 for our midfielders against theirs, you'd have been adding 4 to them because all the defenders would have had no threat in behind. So it would have been 6-on-5 in their favour.
Yeah, I think apart from the fact that he was very good at closing down and positioning himself in terms of closing lanes so that one centre back couldn't find the other centre back and then switch the focus of the attack. I think he also found some groove in his feet. I mean, we always accuse him of having 2 left feet, and of course that one gif is going to sensationalize, his performance from yesterday. I think he was just expecting a challenge and, just took the shot with that sort of approach. But I thought he was decent with the ball at his feet, more so than he has been recently. And I have to say that not having Aubameyang and Lacazette has been the focus of the last week to the build-up of this game. And more so than for other reasons, we have been counting ourselves out of this game because of Danny Welbeck, that who's going to score the goals. When Aubameyang and Lacazette are unable to score, how will Welbeck score? And of course, he didn't get on the scoreline, but I have to say that if it weren't for his contributions and, for the way he was working for the team, I don't know if we would have been able to frazzle the AC Milan defense. And I have to say that Danny Welbeck was very, very impressive. For me, I mean, I have to give a mention to Granit Xhaka here. He gets a lot of shit just like Danny Welbeck week in, week out. And I think yesterday showed that when it comes to these games, when it comes to us playing well, Granit Xhaka is a very integral part, not only our offense, but also of our defense. And that's something he's accused of. How did he stick out for you yesterday? Was he beyond impressive in a lot of regards?
I thought he had a very good game. as I said, I gave man of the match to Welbeck, but it was marginal over Granit. I've been saying for a few weeks now that we either get one of the two out of him. He's either good defensively and awful with the ball at his feet, or vice versa. And when he first came, he was very good with the ball and shocking defensively, to be honest. And in the last few weeks, maybe in the last 2 months, he's been quite good defensively, but seemingly forgot how to pass. And the reason I've always stuck by him is, besides him wearing an Arsenal shirt, so I'll stick by anyone that wears an Arsenal shirt, is, and I say this to my mates all the time that don't rate him, I think he has everything to be able to play that position. Maybe he lacks a bit of mobility, but you don't necessarily need that to be a good defensive midfielder. I mean, people will bring up Kante, who obviously is very mobile, but you look at, say, a Makelele, a Gilberto, they weren't the most mobile. I'm not saying they were slow, but they weren't the most mobile. And I think Xhaka's probably as mobile as them two. The game may have evolved a bit, which could cost him. But the reason I stick by him is because I do think he has it all. And when it does come together and it all works on the same night, which is too few and far between, which is my big criticism of him. But when it does all come together on the same night, he looks like he's capable of anything. I've seen it before from him. I know people are saying it's his best ever performance for us. I don't think it was. But he was very good. He broke up attacks very well. His positioning was very good. And I remember the first time I saw him play for us, or the first month or so, obviously last season, the bloke with the season ticket next to me was on holiday. And then when he came back, obviously I'd seen 2 or 3 games, he said, "Oh, what's this Xhaka bloke like?" And I said, "I really like that he never gets ahead of the ball as a defensive midfielder." And for 3 or 4 weeks, the bloke was like, yeah, like when he first started seeing him, he was like, "You're right, his distribution's brilliant. And his defensive side is lacking, but at least he's positioned in the right place. He's just not very good at it, and he can learn." And then I don't know if it's a tactical thing or he's just took it upon himself, but he started getting ahead of the ball a lot more, which is probably not what you want in a defensive midfielder. And I think yesterday he went back to, I can't remember a time when he was ahead of the ball, unless he was pressing and they'd pass around him, but he knew he had lanes behind him, like people behind him as blockers. I think it was an all-round performance. He showed defensive side, he was good with the ball. Nothing spectacular with the ball, which I think is probably key, because we know he can make 70-yard raking passes. It doesn't mean he needs to try it every time he has the ball. He made a few out to Kolasinac quite early on, but he played very simply. Easy passes, won the ball, gave it to someone else. And I think it did help that he had a lot of bodies around him. As I said, Ozil was coming short, Mkhitaryan was dropping in, Jack dropped in from 10, he had Ramsey next to him. And then where they tried to defend quite narrow, the fullbacks were always an option. So I think it did help that he had options for them easy balls rather than having to play a difficult ball, because he didn't have an easy ball on, which I think happens a lot in the league.
That's the key with that position, isn't it? It's almost like the referee in a way, that the less spoken about after the game, the better perhaps your performance would be. Do the simple things right and do the simple things. Don't overcomplicate stuff. And I think. You brought up a rhetorical question in there, that whether it's from instruction or from his own onus, and I think we know that it's probably himself, because there's not a lot of instruction that's given out on the training ground allegedly. So I think there was a moment later on in the game as well, which I think we all remember, when Granit Xhaka took a shot on from about 30 yards out, and that led Arsene Wenger into his technical area, and sort of a spat followed, where you could see that Granit Xhaka said, "Come on," and then "fuck off," followed by Aaron Ramsey giggling, because I think he heard it. That was a very indicative moment of the time of our club right now, wasn't it?
Well, I just want to butt in there, because although it's all well and fun to bring up that theory, and it goes with I'm not saying your narrative, but the Wenger out narrative that we have at the club right now. Watch it again and watch Jack Wilshere. The editing is not editing because it was live, but the camera cut is perfect to make it look that way. But Jack was screaming for the ball wide and started sulking when he didn't get it. Xhaka said it to him, which is why Ramsey started laughing, because Ramsey wouldn't have had a clue what Wenger said or what Wenger was doing. Again, the editing's very clever and it's all very funny, and it fits with how we're going at the moment. But it's not an indication of what happened. And I'll make Wenger right. It was a fucking stupid decision to shoot from that distance. I know we've all seen him wrap one in the top corner from there, but I hate Robbie Savage, but he got it bang on. If they would have gone up the other end and scored, everyone would have gone from Xhaka's had an excellent game to fuck's sake, he's let them back in the tie.
Right.
And it is decisions like that. But it was stupid from him. And it's not like it was the dying few seconds. They did go on to have another attack. I think Suso overhit a cross at the back post and it came to no one. Went out for a goal kick. But it was a stupid decision. But yeah, that clip, again, it's funny. I laughed. But watch it again and you'll see it wasn't at Wenger.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I think I gave into the narrative just because of how things are right now. It's easy to believe that. So,
I mean, look, it's funny. It's like, again, I will bring it up because I'm proud of it. But our most popular tweet ever is the Gattuso one saying sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. And I mean, most people probably know that it wasn't about Arsenal, but I put, it was straight after the draw I tweeted it, Gattuso knows Arsenal inside out. And the numbers it's done on Twitter are crazy. And again, had I just tweeted that with nothing to do with Arsenal, it would have probably got 10 retweets. You put Arsenal into it, and because it fits the narrative, it gets, I think we're on about 1,500.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that's Twitter in a nutshell for any of you. But I feel that brings this game to a close. If there's anything else you want to touch upon, then please do so. Otherwise, do tell what you expect from the second leg and how you would set us up if you were the manager.
So nothing more on yesterday really. I think after maybe a shaky first 10 minutes, or everyone played well. After 10 minutes, I wanted to kill Mustafi, which is pretty standard.
Yeah, I didn't bring him up for a reason. I thought we'll keep this nice and amicable today.
No. To be fair, it's a credit to him that after the 10th minute, he probably was up there. Well, I mean, I would definitely say performed well. I think he was probably as good as anyone. He protected our goal. He ran with strikers when needed. He covered and crossed over Koscielny. I thought he was good, but after 10 minutes, I wanted to kill him. But yeah, that's pretty much all from me on yesterday. On the second leg, I mean, assuming it's going to be the same group of players available, hopefully no one gets injured on Sunday. I don't see Kolasinac as a long-term injury. I'd be surprised if it was. Mm-hmm. But then Maitland-Niles slipping in might not be the worst thing in the world, because as I said, Suso's going to heavily try and cut in, and he's cutting in on Maitland-Niles' right foot, which is obviously his strong foot, and if he tries to beat him on the outside, Maitland-Niles showed many times, and what we know about him is he's more than quick enough to cope with that. So I'd expect us to line up very similarly, obviously injuries depending. I would expect them to do something different. The onus is on them, and I don't say that because of the 2-0. I say that because of the way they performed. You can't allow the players to have that much space, and if they did rely on the energy, which is what Michael from IFTV, who was our guest last week, kind of suggested, you can have as much energy if you want. If it's 5-on-2 or 5-on-3 not in your favour, you're never going to win that battle. I'm not saying you can't win a game, but you're never going to win that battle. So the onus is on them to change. How we react to that is, I think it's difficult, because I think that's in-game management rather than how you set up. I would set up exactly the same, and what I would probably expect is them to tell them they're free to probably stay more compact, tuck in Çalhanoğlu and Suso, which then probably limits them attacking-wise. But I wouldn't be surprised if they pull their defence up 10 yards to try and change the numbers in that sense. So instead of it being 5-on-3, where the defenders are all a bit tighter, they get more numbers that way. That then is either on us to stretch the pitch by taking Mkhitaryan and Ozil wide, if it is to be them, or to tell Danny to play on the shoulder. But I think that's going to be a lot of in-game management rather than something that you can see in advance. But I would go into the match tending to play the same way as yesterday, and I don't mean obviously the same level as performance, because you could say that every week. But in terms of style, I would go in saying play in that same mould, and then we can adjust it or tweak it slightly depending on what they do.
Fantastic. Now, before we move on to the questions, Tony, there was an Arsenal Supporters Trust AGM this week. And there have been a couple of headlines that have come out from there. Lee Dixon was attending, and so was our friend Mike from Gooners in the USA, who is currently visiting.
Do you mean Mike from Arsenal Fan TV?
So
that's that same Mike.
The same Mike. That's exactly right. So any quick comments on the Supporters Trust meeting?
I think a lot of it. I mean, I couldn't be bothered to go. It's an hour's drive and an hour's drive back, and I thought to hear someone talk for a while is just not really worth it. I think a lot of it's been sensationalised. They have that similar questionnaire every year, and I think the numbers were maybe not as high. I think it was 88% didn't want him to.
That's right. Wenger out.
Yeah. But it was at the end of the season, right? Not immediately.
I couldn't tell you that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was at the end of the season. It might have even been at the end of his contract, but it definitely wasn't immediately. But I think if you can find the numbers from last year, they were very similar. I think it was low 80s last year. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember reading that at the time.
I read 77 somewhere, so it might be somewhere close to that.
Yeah, so it's not a million miles off, but I think just because of where we are with Arsenal at the moment, that headline's been sensationalised, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you have that meeting right after the Milan game, and I bet my ass that figure is much lower than 88, right?
I mean, I don't know, because...
Well, not much lower, but relatively, in terms of, where it was before.
Yeah, I mean, look, the timing hasn't helped in terms of for him, for the results of that study, but I think a lot of Arsenal fans are long-term. I don't think one result's going to change it massively. I think even if we won the Europa League and you had it the day after the final, it probably wouldn't be... It would definitely be lower for obvious reasons. But it wouldn't be. It wouldn't take it down to like 20%, for example. But yeah, as I said, the number was pretty similar last year, and I think it's just been sensationalised due to timing. In terms of what Dixon said, I've not seen all of it, and everyone that was there said that again it's been sensationalised and it's been taken out of context. What Lee Dixon said. Where he's been digging out individual players, for me, I don't care about context. You shouldn't do it. As someone who's seen as I know he's not employed by the club, but he's seen as a figurehead of the club. I mean, someone on Twitter the other day got quotes from Dixon and quotes from Lauren side by side. And Lauren's was like, okay, Hector maybe not going through the best time now, but you could ask me or any sort of legendary right back from Arsenal, and had they been put in the team at 19, I don't think they would have coped either. Which is acknowledging he's not playing well, but still somewhat supportive. Whereas Dixon's just literally ripped into him. He's given him no help there. As a fan, if I thought my views were going to be heard, and in the same way, Dixon will expect to be heard just because of who he is, and especially by Hector being the same position, an Arsenal legend in that position. You can criticise them, but still give them some help or some, I don't want to say leniency. As I said, if I thought I was going to be heard, if I was face to face with Hector, I wouldn't say probably half the stuff I say on the podcast. Not because I'm a bottle job or I'm scared of him or whatever, but it's just not helpful. I want Arsenal to be the best they can be. So I may say that you're not playing the best and these are areas that I feel you could do better. And he probably wouldn't give a shit, which I would expect. But I would be helpful with it. I would say, this is where you're doing it wrong and this is how you could do it better. Not just, you're doing this wrong, I can't see any player in you, why do you keep doing this? So again, people saying it's been taken out of context, but from what I've heard and what people have reported, there was not 1 ounce of positivity there. And again, I don't see it as helpful. And as an Arsenal man, you would think he wants the best for the club, and being helpful is a part of that. I'm not saying he can't have his views and he can't criticise players, but as I said, as an Arsenal fan, you should always want us to do better. And just by saying you're useless at this, you're useless at that, I don't see what you're good at, doesn't help anyone.
I have to say that I sort of disagree with you for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think, well, of course, there was specific mention of players, and there was a lot of conversation that revolved around Hector Bellerin and maybe even Mustafi to an extent. But I think Lee was trying to make a bigger point there. And of course, I wasn't there, so I'm guessing as well based on what I've seen on Twitter. And of course, I had a conversation with Mike about how the proceedings went. And as is the case with most of these things, the good stuff that he said, which was apparently a lot, went unreported. He had a lot of good things to say about Arsene Wenger, starting from how intelligent he is and what a father figure he's been at the club and everything else that comes with it. And as we are falling victims to that ourselves, because we won't talk too much about that, we are going to talk about, the controversial stuff. But I think the point that Lee was trying to make when it came to Hector and to Mustafi, more so to Hector, was the fact that he's had conversations with Boldy, and he's been trying to understand why certain things are happening repetitively, the mistakes especially, and he was trying to make a point that Arsene is controlling the training too much, and he's not letting Steve Bold do his job. So as much as Hector was used, as a part of that argument, I think it was more to do with the overarching control and the dynamic of the staff. So I think I can say that with confidence that both of us can say it with confidence that Lee Dixon loves the club, and when it comes to expressing these views, he's of course a color commentator for the U.S. audience. So we've been hearing him a lot recently when it comes to Arsenal matches, and when it comes to everything wrong with Arsenal Football Club. That might be different in the UK. You guys might not be getting a lot of that content. So that's something I might have to think about a little more, whether I agree with Lauren's approach or with Lee's approach. But I think just being in the realm of journalism and of being active when it comes to vocalizing opinions, I think that's sort of what's propelled Lee further forward in being able to and being free-minded when it comes to expressing these opinions. But yeah, I mean, you're right. When it comes to the club, you should support the club, and I think this is out of supporting the club, because a lot of ex-players feel distanced. They feel shackled. They're not able to do a whole lot. Ian Wright is, of course, another vocal guy who's on BBC Live 5 and always talking about what's wrong at the club. So I like to say to each their own, and live and let live, but at some point you do have to consider the sanctity and the health of the club, and put aside how you truly feel for the greater good. Where one draws the line, I guess, is where the differences come in. But I have to say that this meeting was an eye opener, because there was a lot that was said by Lee that was being theorized earlier. When it came to the training sessions, when it came to different facets of how the football club is run, and a lot of people's fears came true. And if there's one thing that came out of that, was the fact that most of Arsenal fans, and this was an Arsenal Supporters Trust AGM, I must clarify, this was not an Arsenal Football Club AGM. A lot of fans are sick and tired of Arsene Wenger, and if it was in our hands, then he would have been gone already, if not a few years ago. So I thought it would be a good time for us to just have a quick chat about the AGM. Any other comments?
I agree in a sense with what you say, and as I said, I know there was a lot of positives that haven't been reported. I just don't get and I chose Hector because they play in the same position, and it's probably someone that Hector's probably been made to watch videos of Lee Dixon, especially as he wasn't originally a right back. When they were teaching him to play right back, that it was probably Lee Dixon. So it's probably someone he looks up to in a sense. So that's why I chose Hector. But there is nothing to be gained by digging out individual players. And look, I have no love for Mustafi, as any regular listener will know. But saying Valencia couldn't even give it, I've spoke to Gary Neville, and Valencia couldn't even give him away. One, doesn't tell you about the inner workings of the club at all. Two, does no one at all absolutely any favour. Like, why say it? It just didn't need to be said. It doesn't give us any insight into anything. It doesn't help the player. It doesn't help the club. It doesn't help the fan. I don't understand why he said it. It seemed like something he said to be sensational, or to be sensationalized, rather than there was actually a point to it. Yeah,
that one left me scratching my head, because if that's how much you dislike Mustafi, for professional reasons, obviously, and you want the club to get rid of him, but then by saying something like that, you're only driving his price down. And even if it's not true, if you're saying it, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying Lee Dixon was lying. Of course, he had his reasons to say that, but you're not helping the club, at the end of the tunnel. And yeah, that one was shocking, if I'm honest. But yeah, Mike had a good time out there, and Mike and Andy did a podcast. So for all our listeners who are listening to the Gooners in the USA regularly, I encourage you guys to tune in and get a proper podcast on what the proceedings were like. Shall we move forward to questions now, Tony?
Are we not going to do Watford before?
Let's. Why don't you get the ball started?
So Watford on Sunday. Be interesting with the team. I think we'll stick pretty similar fitness allowing. Obviously, Aubameyang will come in. A horrible part of me feels Iwobi's going to play, just because obviously the Europa League is more important now.
Yeah, wrap up
this stage of the season.
Cotton and wool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the players are not going to play every week, every Sunday, Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
We should win. They're not playing brilliantly. They've picked up a little bit. The worry if Kolasinac is out, and it's literally the first thing I thought when Kolasinac went off yesterday was, I don't fancy Troy Deeney at the back post against Maitland-Niles. I don't think that will do us many favours.
Well, to be honest, do you fancy Kolasinac against Troy Deeney on the far post?
More. No, but more so.
For sure.
We should win. I really want to win. I mean, obviously, I really want to win always. But what I really want to happen is us to win comfortably and Wenger to come out and say we won because they're shit. And then watch the press go absolutely ballistic when they beat us and Deeney said we won because they don't have the cojones. That was fine. I don't see the difference. So if we do win, which I hope we do, on Monday's podcast, when you or Tez ask me to analyse the game, I'm going to say we won because they are technically shit.
Yeah, there's nothing I would hope for more because that was a storm in a teacup, and a lot of fans on the Arsenal side were not as resistant to it, me included, because I think there was an essence of truth to it.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, there is truth to it, but there is truth to when we've beaten 4-0 to say they're technically not good enough.
Oh, absolutely.
But if someone came out and said it, they'd get hammered. I was quite shocked that when Kevin Campbell was on and he said, Deeney came out and said it and he's right and it's the last thing you want to hear as a player. I agree with all of them. I just think it was a disgrace he said it and that people let him get away with it so easily. Yeah.
I mean, there's a level of professionalism that has to be maintained, across clubs. When there's injuries, when there's misgivings in football and bad things happen in football, people get together. And of course, Arsenal's demise, if you can call it that, is of course our problem. But to come out publicly and taint the club with all those words was completely unwarranted. But yeah, I expect a good result. I expect a decent performance. I'm not going to say I expect a strong performance, and that's based on the reason that we will see rotation. When you're rotating the squad a little bit, there will be a little bit of difference in communication and in chemistry. So I do expect a decent result. I just hope we don't concede a goal early. And you said the left back position is something you'll be concentrating on, but for me it's also the right back because it seems like Hector Bellerin is going to miss out. And for as good as a game Callum Chambers had, Çalhanoğlu didn't pose a lot of threat with his pace. And I don't know if Richarlison is fit and if he'll be starting or not, but he has bags of pace. So that's something we should definitely watch out for. And quick prediction?
10-0.
10-0, fantastic. I'll go for a 2-1 win to the Arsenal.
What's your 11?
I'll go for a back four. Check. I'll go for Niles over Kolasinac. Despite, even if he's back to 100%, I don't think we should risk him just yet. Just also because we don't know where Nacho is in terms of his fitness. Mustafi, Koscielny, needless to say, in the middle with Chambers on the right. I'll go for Aaron Ramsey and I might actually go for Jack Wilshere and Ramsey. Jack Wilshere and Xhaka pivot. because I'm also not sure how fit Aaron Ramsey is at this point. He missed out the game, against Brighton as well. So that's something I would watch out for. With Mkhitaryan, Welbeck, and Mesut Ozil as our attacking midfielders, and Aubameyang up top. How about yourself?
I wouldn't. Look, I could be completely wrong, but I think Kolasinac may have gone off due to fitness and fatigue rather than an injury. If that's the case, I'd play him and potentially play Maitland-Niles at right back. Because one, again, we kind of Richarlison, as you said, and two, Chambers will then be playing. It would be 4 in a row, which he probably hasn't done since the back end of last season at Middlesbrough, and they're in centre back, which is a lot less running than there is at right back. Saying that, I wouldn't be as worried as you are about Richarlison and Chambers. If you look at Izquierdo from Brighton, he's a very similar in style to Richarlison, and he didn't really give Chambers any issues. Mm-hmm. The midfield's an interesting one because it's just looking at who you rest, really. I think Ozil will play. So going deeper, I'd probably go Jack and Granit as well, and I'd go Mickey, Ozil, Iwobi, Aubameyang.
So
that's literally the team that played at Brighton. Huh?
Iwobi comes in for Welbeck, essentially. Just
literally back to the team that played at Brighton.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. That's what I expect as well. Except, of course, Kolasinac out for Niles. I would rather have Niles on the left and not on the right. But yeah, I think it's pretty much otherwise the same. So we expect a good result. We expect a decent performance. We've picked up some momentum, which seems like it's been a while, hasn't it? I mean, our last positive result was against Östersund away, and before that was Everton. So February and the beginning of March have not been kind to us, and we seem to have picked up some steam at the right time, if you ask me. So let's hope that our boys can do the job on Sunday. You'll be at the game, Tony?
Yeah, I'm at the game.
Yeah, so for anyone listening, if you want to hit up Tony, then you know where to find him.
You don't.
You don't. That's what he said. All right, so let's move forward and get to our listener questions. We'll follow the same pattern as last time, since just me and Tony. I'll get the ball started.
Yep.
All right, so this is from Uncle Joseph, and Joseph has a 0 instead of O. He asks, have you ever seen Tottenham win the league?
Have you ever seen Tottenham win the league? Have you fuck?
Let's talk about that game a little bit, if you don't mind. Because,
yeah, brilliant.
I didn't catch the whole thing. I was watching Black Panther, which, by the way, if people haven't checked it out, they must. But I did come back and catch some of the highlights. I fancy that we were talking about Paulo Dybala a day before that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So fantastic result for the old lady. And talk me through the game. Talk me through a brief of the game.
Tottenham completely dominated the first half. I mean, Juventus should have had a stonewall penalty at 0-0. It's one of them things that is such a penalty, it defies belief that it wasn't given. It wasn't marginal. There was nothing blocking. It's just unbelievable it wasn't given. But yeah, Tottenham dominated the first half. And then a very clever tactical change from Allegri. And Tottenham didn't react. And I mean, this is probably one of the first times we've seen criticism of Tottenham from their own fans. Obviously, as Arsenal fans, we criticise ourselves pretty much all the time. But Tottenham tend to not do that, or be in a happy place where they don't do that. But for the first time, especially like me, I've got a few season ticket holders, mates that are season ticket holders at Tottenham. And to be honest, for a while, they've not said it like openly and shouted it loudly. They've always said that Pochettino's only really got a plan A. His subs are always awful. He never knows when to change it, and he just does it out of desperation rather than a tactical change. Mm. And we saw that massively on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was, Wednesday. And now sort of people are going, Tottenham fans seem to be a bit more public about it. I mean, you get some that are claiming that they won 150 of the 180 minutes. Couldn't care less. Doesn't matter. You went out. But yeah, hopefully it's the start of them turning on their own club.
I mean, They did really well. Let's give them credit for where it's due. They did really well in winning. and don't worry, it's going to go downhill at some point. But in terms of winning the group, they did well. But you have to say that if they are going to if they are going to fall to clubs like Juventus, and Juventus is a massive club, no doubt. I mean, if you're Harry Kane, if you're Dele Alli, I hate saying it, but if you're Dele Alli, if you're Christian Eriksen to an extent, aren't you reevaluating your position at this point? I mean, you don't make enough money as some of your contemporaries. Harry Kane arguably doesn't have a contemporary for how good he has been this season and has been for the past couple of seasons. So, I mean, it seems very obvious to me, but it also might just be because I'm an Arsenal fan. But it seems very obvious that there's going to be a mass exodus at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I don't want to give them any credit for winning the group because we've done that shit for years and it was, so they're going to go out in the last 16 again. And by and large, the people that said that were right. But when Tottenham do it, apparently it's some fucking miraculous achievement. We topped the group with PSG last year. PSG then went on to beat Barcelona 4-0 at home. And then they went out in the tie, but they were arguably, I don't even think it's an argument, I think they were robbed. So, I mean, yeah, Dortmund and Real Madrid was a tough group, but I said we won a group with PSG in it last year and then went out to Bayern and it was same old Arsenal, whereas Tottenham do it and suddenly they need an open top bus parade. It's nonsense. In terms of players leaving, look, Dele Alli's changed his agent. I think it's pretty much public knowledge. If it's not, it is now. He's changed his agent and I think he'll be off in the summer. Well, that's depending. I think he changed his agent at the start of the season, but he's been pretty bad this year. And maybe some of the bigger clubs that were looking at him might have had second thoughts. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan. That's needless to say. Harry Kane's, look, I think any club in the world should be looking at him, to be honest. Whether it'll be this summer, who knows? But if I was literally any club that's serious about winning things, especially in Europe, and had that kind of money, I would be going all out for Harry Kane. I don't think he'll leave them in this summer. But, yeah, I make you right. They're not going to get paid the money they do elsewhere. They're, by and large, look, they could still win the FA Cup this year, but by and large, they're not going to win the titles that these other clubs win. So, for me, they hopefully will have problems with players at some point and hopefully very soon.
I'll put you on the spot real quick. Let's imagine Harry Kane is leaving this summer, and I mean, I think it's quite obvious that it's going to be one of the bigger clubs, who can afford him. If you had to associate a value with him, a price tag for him, what would you say is the realm of things we're looking at?
It's difficult because Levy is very good in the transfer market. It depends how much Tottenham need money and how much Kane kicks up a fuss about going, especially when he hears the amount contract-wise that he'd be looking at. You've got to go at least the second most valuable player ever, which takes him above 150. Do I rate it? Is he as good as Neymar? Probably not. Well, no. Is his worth to Tottenham worth more than that? Potentially. So you could be looking at a world record fee. Look, Neymar wouldn't have been. I'm not. People might think that because I'm saying this, I'm saying he's rated as highly as Neymar. Neymar wouldn't have gone for 200 million if he didn't have a release clause. Barcelona would have rejected that. In the same way they'd reject 200 million for Messi and potentially even Suarez, although age is not on his side. So I'm not saying because Harry Kane could potentially go for more than Neymar, he's higher rated. It's just he doesn't have a release clause. Tottenham are very good in negotiations. And if Kane doesn't kick up a fuss to go, then all the cards are in Tottenham's hands. They'll obviously happily keep him if he's happy being there. So you're going to have to take a hell of a lot of money to make anything otherwise.
Yeah, I can't imagine it being anywhere less than 150. I think you're right, just because of all the factors you mentioned. And let's not forget that they have an exorbitant stadium they have to pay for. And, if Harry Kane is going to be off the books, then they would like to wipe off a lot of that debt or a lot of that expense. So I think you're right. It's going to be a tough negotiation, but let's hope it goes through despite wherever he's going to be going.
Okay.
That's enough for Tottenham, right?
Yep. So I'll get on to our next question, which is from Mike at Arsenal Fan TV. He can also be found at Gooners in the USA podcast. What will it take for Maitland-Niles to force his way into the everyday first 11? Play him at keeper if you have to. Also, congratulations to Schwinn's favourite German team on their massive victory as well.
Oh, God.
# cheers from Milano.
Yeah, so Mike was at the San Siro yesterday, and I think his trip was definitely worth it. As for Maitland-Niles, I think we need to, as fans, we need to consolidate our views, because on this podcast, we've advocated for players to break into the 11. You know, we think that that's the best way for an individual's progression when it comes to their careers. But I think Maitland-Niles is past that at this point. You know, that may sound weird, but I think he has made a name for himself in terms of being able to fit in when required. What I mean by consolidating our views is whether we want him to continue as a fullback or we want him in midfield, because we've seen he has the ability to play both, but I think from here on out it's more important that we embed him into the position that we see him play long term. Arsenal's made that very clear that for him it's a center midfield role. That might change under a new manager if that's the case, but I see where this is coming from, because we want him to be slotted into right back or left back. Personally, I don't fancy that. He has the skill to play it, and he can come in and do a job. But I would much rather see him make his way up in midfield than play in as a fullback. I think there's still time that he needs. So it's not about really forcing your way into midfield, into the first 11. It's about gathering the experience, and it's putting in those hours at the training ground. I think that's what he lacks right now. And yes, he has been very bright in certain cases, but we don't want to pile the pressure on him and expect magical things from him. I think time would serve him better than the angst from Arsenal fans after a bad performance, if that makes sense.
So the German team, who was that?
Yeah, Mike corrected me, so it's Leipzig is what I've been told. And they did win yesterday, didn't they? I think Salzburg also won, and they beat Dortmund. So if we do, come across them in the next round, then I might have to take a hiatus from our podcast.
It's just on a side note. It's quite interesting because at the start of the year, they were UEFA were going to ban one of them from playing European competition due to you're not allowed to be owned by the same owner isn't allowed a stake in the same club in the same competition. And even though they weren't in the same competition at the start of the year, there was obviously the prospect of what's happening with Leipzig coming third and dropping down into Europa League. So it will. I mean, obviously UEFA have ruled that as okay, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when they play each other. If they had to play each other. Yeah,
let the conspiracies come in, right?
No, they've already started.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Let's move on, and I'll throw the next question at you. And this is from the host of a much listened to and loved podcast, which is the Clark Kent Talk. This is Teza sending us a question as he misses out due to injury. He goes on to say that was probably the best performance I've seen from Arsenal in some time. Jack, Xhaka, Ramsey. I feel they should start every game in the midfield together, with Aubameyang up top and Ozil and Mickey behind. What are your thoughts?
I've just seen that's got 58 likes, which is unbelievable. I don't think, when I had my personal Twitter, I don't think I had 58 likes on anything ever.
People seem to love that combination of names, huh?
Yeah, I'm surprised it's got a Xhaka in it as well, that it's got that much love. It was very good yesterday. I don't think, again, some time is quantifiable. I would arguably say we was better at home to Chelsea in the second leg of the cup semi-final. You could say we was better against Everton, although they were a walkover. So I'm not going to comment too much on that part of it. In terms of the team, it worked very well yesterday, and the transitions were very good. Against a team that parks the bus, would we get enough people around the striker? I don't know. It's something definitely worth trying, and it could be our best 11, and it also gets probably our best players into the best 11, which doesn't always work, but this system seems to. I thought Jack was, in terms of on a personal level, was probably 5 to 10 yards too far forward for his optimum position yesterday. But Jack will happily sacrifice that for the team, whereas other players may not be willing to. But Jack seems like he's happy to, and I don't think Jack will ever excel in that role. But if it allows the team to be better, he will certainly try and do it. So it is something I would like to give a run to and give a run of games in that 11. But I wouldn't go and say, this should be our 11 from now until the end of time.
Yeah, no arguments here. I think you nailed nailed it on the head. That can we continue to have this sort of form if a team is much deeper and that usually is the case in the Premier League, especially when we're playing most of the other teams that are below us at this point. And I think that's one of the reasons Aubameyang has struggled. Yesterday, I think someone like Aubameyang who loves running in behind, could have excelled. And that's a very continental sort of style of play. So it would be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of love for those players, even though Xhaka is in that list. I think there's a lot of love for them, for one way or the other. So it'll be interesting to see how Wenger tries to fit in people into the Premier League once everyone is fit. And I would like to throw in Lacazette into that mix as well, because I think he would also like to fancy his chances.
I was just going to say, just to add to that, that 11 was picked to control the ball against West Brom at home, or pretty much most teams in the Premier League at home, barring probably the other members of the top six. They're going to let us control the ball anyway. You don't have to fight to control the ball. So that's when that team would be sort of interesting to see how it copes when their main strength is taken away from them, because they're just given it. They don't have to work for it.
And to that point, gears, I think Mesut Ozil was, sort of... he was instrumental in switching gears yesterday, but I think Milan let us do that. They let us set the tempo. And, of course, when you have the ball against a team like West Brom, as you said, Tony, you might enjoy possession, but they might not let you set the tempo. They might be pressing you in certain situations where you're able to retain the ball, but you're not able to pass it to the person you want to build up play. So, I think that's somewhere where Milan really were lacking. They were not pressing the ball well, and that let us set the tempo. And I think we enjoy that when we're able to slow down the game and then pick it up, right at the edge of the box. With too many bodies there, with too many players there, I don't know how often we can do that. I hope we can. I hope this is something we can build upon, but it's definitely something to look out for.
Moving on to the next question, and it's from our regular Glenn Baxter. Have you seen a better game than Granit Xhaka played last night? Unbelievable. His distribution was on, directed traffic well, and plays much better when there's three across the middle. A much needed response from the boys.
I'll address the second portion real quick. That yes, I do think that he's better when it's three in the middle. As you said, Tony, Jack was a little bit higher, especially in the first half. He was almost occupying that number 10 role. But I think as the game progressed, he fell further back and was making that third man in midfield. In terms of his best game, I think he has. I mean, the one that jumps out to me, of course, is the FA Cup final against Chelsea. I think that was perhaps his best game. In more recent memory, Tottenham at home comes to mind. I think Aaron Ramsey and Granit Xhaka were untouchable that day. And that's sort of the larger point about Granit Xhaka, that he has shown abilities. I think both me and you have spoken about it. And Tez, who is, of course, a big fan of Xhaka, that he has the attributes. He has the stylistic attributes to fit in. It's just a matter of putting a system around him. And that's exactly what Glenn is talking about, having three men in midfield, having those two players around him that compensate for his lack of pace. Because if you ask him to do a job in terms of mobility, he will struggle. So the solution to that is to put someone next to him as well, so that he can concentrate on his position and let those two midfielders drive the ball forward if Xhaka is unable to ping a ball forward. So I think he has the skill. We saw that yesterday. It's just a matter of time and just a matter of building around him, if you ask me.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I don't think it's just go down to the three in midfield. To be fair, as I said, I think Ozil and Mickey both tucked in. It gave him 4 forward options when he had the ball, as well as 2 centre backs and 2 full backs. So he was picking up the ball with, my maths isn't very good, with 8 options, arguably 9 if you include the keeper, and 10 if he went long into Welbeck in behind. So he's picking up the ball with pretty much everyone as an option. Whereas a lot of the time when he picks up the ball, not just him, whoever plays in that role, you say the same for Coquelin when he played, you could say the same for El Neni. They get the ball and they have 1 or 2 options. And a lot of the time they tend to be backwards or sideways, and then they get labelled with, oh, he's a crab footballer for passing backwards and sideways. But I'd rather that, as shit as it is, I'd rather that than giving the ball away all the time. So I think yesterday it's not just that we had 3 in midfield. I think that there was just options absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that circles in with effort to an extent, where players are making themselves available, and I think you're onto something, because we've lacked that in the last few weeks. But let's not get too negative, and let's move on. Our next question is from Srinath Murali, who's at Shri the Gooner. He asks, do you guys think Gattuso will tackle, punch someone on the face repeatedly, and then eventually burst open if he gets angry enough?
I've not seen much of him since he was a player. I literally thought he was going to have a heart attack at times yesterday. He looked like on the verge of explosion. He was so red, and he's like quite a compact guy anyway, that it looked like his face had stretched to maximum stretchicity and was just about to blow. I hope he's medically okay. In all seriousness, with what's gone on, I literally hope he's medically okay. But yeah, I mean, someone said, again, I don't know how much sense this will make to fans abroad, that we should hire Joe Jordan just for a little touchline fight. If that doesn't make sense, they had Joe Jordan was Portsmouth assistant when they played AC Milan, and there was a bit of a touchline, not quite a scrap, a kerfuffle on the touchline with Joe Jordan. But I think with the way Gattuso looked yesterday, that could tip him over the edge.
Wait, did you say Portsmouth?
Yeah.
So was that like a friendly? Because I'm imagining.
No, it was in the year Portsmouth won the FA Cup. They were obviously in the Europa League. May have even been the Europa Cup then, but they were in this competition. And they played AC Milan, and they drew 2-2 at Fratton Park. They were 2-0 up. And I think Ronaldinho scored a ridiculous last-minute free kick. Someone scored a ridiculous last-minute free kick. I'm pretty sure it was Ronaldinho. But yeah, so Portsmouth Milan at Fratton Park, and there was a... Actually, the Gattuso and Joe Jordan thing might have been when Joe Jordan was at Tottenham. I'm not sure. Joe Jordan and Gattuso had a little disagreement somewhere. But yeah, Portsmouth did play AC Milan. But yeah, thinking back, it may have been when Joe Jordan was at Tottenham.
Yeah, because I know that AC Milan knocked out Tottenham at some point. I think, was it from the No, was it not from the Champions League?
No, Tottenham knocked them out. Tottenham knocked AC Milan out the year they got to the quarters, and they lost 4-0 to Real Madrid, or 5-0.
That's right. Yeah, but I think she's right that on the touchline yesterday, it did seem like Gattuso was going to have a panic attack and a heart attack at the same time, if one can manage that. But yeah, let's move forward.
Okay, my order of questions may be a bit different to you, so I'll just read what I've got in front of me. Has Arsenal found the most effective solution in deploying both Ramsey and Jack in midfield? Do you think he will try and stick with that pair in the Premier League as well? That's from the Texas Schooner.
That's a very tough question, because I actually don't have an answer for that. I don't think this is the most effective solution. Contrary to most fans, I don't think that Jack Wilshere and Aaron Ramsey can play in the same team, because as good as Granit Xhaka is, at this point, he's not exactly what we want alongside Jack Wilshere and Aaron Ramsey. I think we need someone even more defensive-minded if we want to play Jack and Aaron together. I think with time they can build it, but I have not seen anything so far, and I mean, apart from yesterday's game, which I don't think is a great benchmark because we've discussed Milan's failings. I think it's something to build upon. Is it something which that one could characterize as an effective solution? I'm not quite convinced. As for the Premier League, again, there's going to be a lot of rotation in the next few weeks as we discover how we're going to take up on the Premier League and what our future is with the Europa League. So I think it's a matter of time, and it's one of those things that, something that might stick at one point is what we stick with for the future. So I don't think it's a definitive answer. I think it's more subjective to the situation right now, if that makes sense.
Just my take on it. As I said, I don't think that suits Jack. So I don't think it's the most effective solution. I think it is an effective solution in that it gets them both on the pitch, and I would personally say we're a better team with them both on the pitch than the likes of an Iwobi or an El Neni or pretty much anyone else that I can think of in the squad that wasn't included yesterday that you could have brought in for one of them too. As I said, I don't think Jack playing that far forward suits him. And likewise, if you rotate them, so Ramsey's the one further forward, I don't think it suits Ramsey. For me, the most effective solution would be the two slightly... Well, not the most effective solution. The way that would suit them two best is them two both playing slightly ahead of Xhaka. So if anyone plays Football Manager or FIFA, the formation, how it would be lined up on there would be a back four, and then Xhaka between the lines, and then Jack and Ramsey in the middle with Ozil and Mkhitaryan slightly further forward, and a striker being Aubameyang, Welbeck, Lacazette, whoever it is, obviously up front. I think that way would suit them two best, but then does it suit Granit Xhaka and does it suit everyone else? I don't know. So I think yesterday was an effective way. I don't think it was the most effective way.
And just on that, I think the most glaring question for me is Mesut Ozil. Because if we are thrusting Aaron and Jack into the same team, that means Ozil remains on the wing. For me, that's not his most effective position. I know he drifts in, from wide, and so does Mkhitaryan from the left. But when it comes to defensive responsibilities, and we are okay with Mesut Ozil not being that active on defense, because that's not what he's good at. So we should build around him. But I much prefer Mesut Ozil in the hole, because whoever a right back is gets left out, to dry if Mesut Ozil is in the wing. I think he did a decent job yesterday in tracking back, especially in the first half. But you can see that there will be a struggle if a team is much more aggressive from their own left side, and that's another thing for me that shouts not having Aaron Ramsey and Jack Wilshere in the squad together. So again, I think Tony's right that it is an effective solution. As far as the most effective solution, I don't know if that's the right one, but only time will tell. Our next question is from Callum McKay, who is at Callum MCKA. He has a couple of pointers here. He asks, who was your man of the who was your MOTD? For me, it was Xhaka. Back to man of the match, in my opinion. And also, who would you like to see at right back from now onwards? Chambers had a good performance, but lacks in areas.
Yeah, I think he meant MOTM, obviously, man of the match. And saying back-to-back man of the matches for Xhaka, obviously, I said on here, I thought he was against Brighton. I didn't think he was yesterday, but there's an argument to be had. I said I favoured Welbeck, but I can appreciate Xhaka played very well, and I can understand why many would choose him. In terms of at right back, it's difficult because they both have... no, to be honest, it's not difficult. I would still play Hector. The difficulty comes with they both have their skill sets and they both have their weaknesses. For me, Hector suits us better, as frustrating as he can be. And also, bear in mind, we're comparing Chambers' best performance for us at right back in probably 3 years, compared to probably thinking of Hector not being brilliant. If you compared Hector's best game with Chambers' best game, there'd be no comparison. And again, I'm not particularly a big Hector fan, but for me, I think it's a pretty easy decision that Hector should be our right back.
I agree.
On to the next question then. I'm just going to skip over some. So MAA Gunnar says, where does Xhaka play best and alongside who? But we've covered that. Mm-hmm. Vish says, how do you rate the new midfield pairing? Actually, we will answer that one. So he says, how do you rate the new midfield pairing of Xhaka, Wilshere, Ramsey, with Ozil dropping deep to pick up the ball to make the quick transition from defence to attack? So obviously we've talked about the players, but we've not really talked about the transitions. So in terms of transitions, what did you think of that yesterday?
Again, I thought we were very good in transitions, but I think it keeps bringing, I keep coming back to the point of how bad Milan were. And more importantly, how will these transitions take place in the Premier League? Because we don't get too many chances to transition, in the Premier League. And when we do, we don't seem to be that effective. I like Mesut Ozil dropping deep, especially if you're camped in the other team's half. But I feel a lot of times it comes out of frustration. And if Mesut Ozil is really dropping in, at times we saw him at almost the right back position with Callum Chambers, trying to bring width and be almost parallel with Welbeck up top. It scares me because if we give the ball away, and we have plenty of players in our team who can give the ball away, with Mustafi being a candidate number one right now, I fear for the team. I would much rather us not hold on to possession and take a shot at goal every now and then. I am a little all over the place with my thoughts here, but I think that's fair because the team right now is so inconsistent. It's so sporadic. No one expected a result from us yesterday. So for me to suddenly take this game and be happy-go-lucky with the way things worked out, I want to be a little more cautious. What do you think of this? Because I think it's an interesting question.
Again, I just put it down to having options. The transitions were better, but as I said earlier, when Xhaka, when he's at the base, looks up and he's got either fullback on, a ball back to the defenders, or Ozil either dropping too deep for me to come and get the ball, he's open but he's not effective, and then everyone else marked. It makes it difficult. Where, as I said, essentially we had 5 versus 3 in the middle yesterday. If Xhaka's got the ball and there's one pressing him, then they've only got 2 players to cover Jack, Rambo, Mkhitaryan and Ozil. So he's got an easy forward ball on that he can make pretty much most of the time, Granit Xhaka. And it's a transition because the ball's going forward to an attacking player who's going to be in space. What did help as well is that especially when Mkhitaryan drifted in from the left, Calabria tended to follow him. And then Kolasinac got in down the outside. So I think in terms of the transitions, it was just aided by having so many options. What will be interesting is when teams don't give us them options, when they do go, as I said, 5v5 in the middle of the pitch and sacrifice an attacker for it. I think Milan overcompensated an attack where they had 3 attackers that they just thought we're going to leave up at all times. And they, to use a phrase, they cheated on their defending, Milan. Whereas teams in the Premier League aren't going to do that. There's no way Watford are going to leave 3 up on Sunday and allow space for us in the midfield. So it'll be interesting to see how the transitions work when suddenly you don't have an easy ball on to one of them attacking players in space.
I think that's a very, very good point. That as you said, they shed their defensive responsibilities. It might have been a tactical decision, but I think exactly right. English teams are not going to give us that much time and space. And only then will we find out if this is really something we can build upon, or is Europe just a little more open when it comes to play. I'll throw the next question towards you. This is from @ZuroPaBob. His question is about Danny Welbeck. He says, what is it about Danny Welbeck that always makes him fall over? Does he need a hearing test to check his balance? It's actually beyond a joke now.
It's
that one instance that has stuck, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess what I was going to say. I just feel like this is a criticism of Danny Welbeck. And again, I'll go on to say this. Once you realise what he's good at and what he's bad at, you can appreciate him a lot more. Again, I have to keep saying this. I'm not advocating him as the best striker in the world, or even that he should be starting for us. But what was it Einstein said about a goldfish? If you judge a goldfish on its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's an idiot.
Yep.
Very similar to Danny Welbeck. If you're going to only judge him on his link-up play, his first touch, you're always going to think he's awful no matter what he's done. But when you realise what he was very good at yesterday, you'll see that he actually had a very good game. There's more than one way to play football. To use Einstein's thing, you get a monkey to climb a tree, it's very good at it. You put a monkey in a sea and it's not very good, where a goldfish would be. I mean, maybe not in a sea, it'll get eaten, but you get the point. You have them in a swimming race, the goldfish wins. You have them in a race to climb a tree, the monkey wins. Danny Welbeck is that sort of player that if you're having a battle of the first touch and whatnot, then he's going to lose out. But if you're looking at pace and power and strength, then Danny Welbeck is better than a hell of a lot of strikers out there. And even for when Mkhitaryan hit the bar, he got the ball on the halfway line, spun and turned, and he left the defender for absolute dead. I don't know who it was. I can't remember who it was. And then to add to that, the bit that surprised me, he played a pinpoint ball to Mkhitaryan, who should have scored.
And what a pass that was. I mean, the vision to spot that. Yeah.
And that was where, and you touched on it earlier, Danny was better football-wise than we've come to expect from him. But as I said, I think bringing up a time when he fell over, when, as I said, he had a very good game. Look at what he's good at. He had maybe 10 good moments yesterday and 2, say, bad ones. But not one question that I've seen so far has mentioned anything he done that was good.
Yeah. I saw someone tweet earlier, I forget who it was, and I want to credit them, but I'm sorry for not. But they said that, Danny Welbeck would be a defender's worst nightmare, because even Danny Welbeck doesn't know what he's going to do next. So,
it's not only that. I remember Rio Ferdinand always. So Kaká came out and said Rio Ferdinand's the worst defender, the hardest defender I've ever played against. He's quick, he's strong, he's like a Rolls Royce with the ball. And then about 3 days later, Rio Ferdinand came out and said Adebayor is the hardest player to play against because he's quicker than you, so you have to drop deep. But then he'll probably beat you in the air, so you don't really know what to do. Then he's probably stronger than you, and if all of them things aren't working for him that day, he'll go and stand next to the fullback, who he is probably quicker than, probably stronger than, and almost certainly taller than. And I'm not comparing Danny Welbeck to Emmanuel Adebayor, but it's quite similar, that he's going to beat you in one of them 3 aspects. And if he doesn't, he'll go over to the fullback, and he will certainly beat them in one of them 3 aspects. So as much as we laugh about his footballing ability, and again, I have to say I know it's bad, he's the type of player that is horrible and very hard to play against. And that you might say, and I will say, but you give him a chance and he might not score. That is good for the team. But in terms of actually, I mean, obviously the opposition, but in terms of actually playing against him, he's hard work. He is hard work to play against. And him missing that chance, all it does is let you off the hook. It doesn't make him any easier to play against.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's no denying that. I mean, yesterday was an exhibition from Danny Welbeck. I think that's all we need to say. I think he was absolutely world class yesterday with his work rate. There were obviously instances that have been sensationalized, but I would just echo as Tony's point there that giving him a chance and learning what he does well would really benefit us. And I've come out and said many times that he needs to be nowhere close to our football club, but I'll be honest, I think I jumped the gun on that, and I think he deserves a chance because he brings an edge to the team, and he's now doing that as a number 9, where people have just counted him out. His strength is obviously the wing. Arson obviously differs with me on that, but to bring that work rate from up top, running the channels, dropping deep when required, hassling defenders of the quality of Bonucci with Romagnoli besides him. I think yesterday was a Danny Welbeck show, so completely in agreement with that.
Okay, on to the next question, and it's Vish again. I'm going to cut off half the question because we've kind of covered it. But do we attribute this yesterday's performance to the team playing for the badge or for the outgoing manager? I say outgoing with quotes because we have no idea.
I think the players turned up for themselves yesterday. I don't think it's one way or the other for the manager. And having said that, I also think that when players do not turn up, I don't think it's against the manager. I think when you're a professional, especially at that higher level, you need something worthy to push you out of bed for. The Premier League right now is a dead rubber, as most of us have sort of understood at this point. And I think the Europa League poses a newer challenge. It poses something in the future that will be concrete and something worth it. So I think it's just a matter of the script. I think it's more down to the fact that there's something here to be won. Of course, you could take this argument and completely nullify it if you see it in the lens of the Carabao Cup final where we didn't. But I would argue we played to win that day. We just couldn't pull through because City were far superior. So I think it's for themselves. I think it'd be unfair to say that it's not for the badge or one way or the other. It could be both. But I think players need a challenge. And when you have a manager like Arsene Wenger who isn't necessarily the most motivating person in the locker room, then it's the platform. It's the script that sort of pushes you to perform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement that some motivation has to come from within, regardless of who you've got motivating you. You could have Guardiola, Mourinho, Gattuso, whoever you want. There has to be that extra, might only be 5% from yourself. And I think with us at the moment, where in the league especially, we're obviously not going to will it, and we're almost certainly not going to get top four. So that extra 5% from themselves may be lacking. Is that unforgivable? Probably. Is it understandable? Almost definitely. So whereas this game, there is something on the line. It's a two-legged tie. You can go and win it. And I think it's similar to why we've been quite a good cup team in the last few years. Because you can actually take it one game at a time or two games at a time in terms of a two-legged tie, rather than looking at the grand scheme of things. Whereas if the grand scheme of things, say on Sundays, if we beat Watford, it doesn't really mean a damn thing. Whereas if we beat Milan over one leg, and then you can take down to the second leg, and then you're potentially going to be in the quarterfinals, and there's a goal in sight. Whereas with the league at the moment, again, I pose this to our listeners. What is the goal at the moment? And I know people say, win the league next year, but for the remaining, whatever there is, 12 league games, what is the goal? Just to pick up as many points as possible and see what happens? I don't think that inspires the extra couple of % motivation from the players that's needed.
Yeah, and it is the players' responsibility now, I would argue, that we've really had a tough time in picking up some momentum. Now that we have, it is the players' responsibility that just because we have a Premier League game right now, which is a distraction at the moment, we don't let that momentum to fall through. We need to be able to make sure that this momentum that we picked up, we carry on, fighting with it and using it, because you can't turn yourself on and off based on who you're playing. It helps; it's a catalyst. But at the same time, you need something already that's giving you that, that sort of boost. So it shouldn't be used as an excuse to not perform in the Premier League, because if we are able to sustain these performances, it's going to only help us. So I think that's something that we must be vigilant of. Otherwise, it's really going to be a tough situation for us.
Well, just again, sorry, I just want to add very quickly, because I know we've been rattling on for a while, but two things that are always like they're seen as just givens. It's not even theories in football. It's just seen as two things that are fact in football. One, Thursday, Sunday doesn't help anyone. Mm-hmm. And two, there's the curse of the Carling Cup or Carabao Cup or whatever it's been named in the past. So we're going to suffer from both these things, but no one's given us an inch of leeway, and I don't think they should. But it seems like every other year teams get, they're playing Sunday, Thursday, of course they can't expect it to be good every week. Or, they got to the cup final, they've had a very busy schedule up until February, so they're going to fade at the end of the year. And again, I don't accept them. I don't think they should be excuses. But every other year, that seems to be acceptable. And this year, for some reason, everyone seems to be agreeing with me that it's not acceptable.
Yeah, whatever floats your boat, I guess. That's what guides you. Let's move on to our next question. This is from Football Justin. He has a couple of questions. I'll stop after the first one so that I can get your response. Since Aubameyang is cup tied to Dortmund in the Europa League, if Arsenal win it, can he receive a Europa League medal?
No, and I don't think he would get one for Dortmund either, because he's not played in the competition.
Okay. And his next question is it just me, or does Wenger only start to pull his finger out of his ass when his job is on the line?
I would like to say it's just him. It's a difficult one to answer. I don't think he'd done anything yesterday that he hasn't done before, particularly. Mm-hmm. It just worked. They allowed us more time. It's difficult because last season we went on a about a 15 game, we only lost one in the last 15, and everyone put it down to the change of shape. We always go on a run and people put it down to this, that or the other. Does he start doing any? I mean, look, I highly doubt in the last 10, 15 games of the season he starts completely changing his style of management. It all works perfectly. We win the cup as we did last year. We only lose 1 in 15, and then at the start of the next season he goes, fuck this, my job's safe, I'm just going to chill with a cigar. I mean, that doesn't happen. It's why the change. Look, I'm not calling this a change at the moment because we won one football match. But why things are happen differently at different times, and we tend to get better at the business end of the season despite already being out of business, is anybody's guess, really.
Yeah, and to your point, he didn't do anything tactically different either, So I don't necessarily think that this is Wenger pulling his finger out of his ass. This is not to say that his finger was in his ass, but there was nothing different in terms of tactics. It was more down to the effort. It was more down to the players, I would say. So, I mean, this is one of those performances that has set precedent over the years. Because we've seen this happen in the past. As you said, we've started going on runs. As the latter half of the season comes to a close. And this is the sort of performance that has given the board and the brass at Arsenal Football Club the confidence that Arsene is the person to lead us in the future. I think this time out, though, it's a little different because people realize that he is not where he needs to be as a manager. So I think Arsene knows that as well. So it's not necessarily him pulling his finger out of his ass, but I think it's more about the players realizing that the Europa League is the only way we can save the season, and it's them pushing for a better result.
Okay, so next question is from Sam Spade, who's at Guna Mort. Do you think Arsene Wenger should start Ospina in goal versus Watford? Czech was pretty poor last weekend.
I wouldn't do that. I would throw Czech in goal just because it's the Premier League and he knows the league better. I think he's a better communicator than Ospina as well. I think Ospina is, of course, a little more athletic and is willing to come out for crosses and stuff like that. I am more comfortable with Ospina on set pieces as well, I feel. I feel Czech is a little more dicey in those situations. But you cannot put a price tag on experience. And I think Czech's experience, despite some of his more recent failings, is really, really valuable to us. So I would stick with Czech in goal. How about you?
I mean, just because you have predefined roles at the start of the season, as Czech as the league keeper and Ospina as the cup keeper, I would pretty much stick to it. I disagree with about Ospina on set pieces. I know Czech made a high-profile error from the set piece last week, but Ospina I find is horrible from set pieces. He flaps at absolutely everything. He doesn't track the flight of the ball at all. I mean, there was one yesterday where it was too high. Bonucci was never going to score, but what Ospina was doing, I'll never know. Standing behind him with his arms at about head height was ridiculous. I literally worry every time a team gets a set piece against us with Ospina in goal. But no, I would still play Czech.
Fair enough. Yeah, I completely forgot about that moment. I mean, that was 4 yards away from goal, and Bonucci was clear on goal. I don't know how he missed that.
I think it was too high, so I don't think he was ever going to score. I don't even think it was a bad miss. So it hit the top of his head, but
it whisked off.
It's just where Ospina was standing just baffles me.
Fair enough. Let's move on to our next question, and this is from @TJBear5. He's got a couple, so I'll throw these at you before we wind up the pod for today. His first question is the goal for a new manager to win trophies or to make us competitive again? Because managers like Sarri would make us competitive again, and then build on that to eventually win trophies.
It's a very difficult one because I would say both. Because the reality is, if we become like Tottenham, who, let's be honest, have built a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, but have won fuck all, we will be heavily criticised, as we heavily criticise them, and we get heavily criticised regardless of winning things. So if we built and came top 4 every year for the next 5 years, or 3 years, say, and that's building for me, came, third a couple of times and second, but didn't win anything, and got quarters or semis of the cup and quarters or last 16 of the Champions League. we would have exactly the same narrative we did 5 years ago. In 2012 or 2013, we hadn't won a cup for ages. We was getting last 16, last 8 of the Champions League every year. We was coming in the top 4 every year, and everyone hammered us. I think just with the position we're in, I don't think it's possible, to be honest, but I think you have to do both. I think you have to build and win the league. Maybe not in the first year. I don't think anyone's going to expect someone to come in and suddenly we'll be world beaters. But I don't think just building is enough over a 3-year plan. I think if a new manager comes in and just builds for 3 years, I think the board will accept it. Of course they will. In terms of fans, I don't know if we would. In terms of the media, they almost certainly wouldn't. So it's a very difficult question. It's a good question, but it's a very difficult one to answer because it's obvious we need to build, but will people stand for building without trophies?
I think this is a great question, and actually I think at TJ Bear 5 sort of knew how our response would be, and just to follow up with your response, he has another question that asks, how much time would a new manager get at the club? Because I think that will be very indicative of where we see the club going.
It depends. With the current board in charge, or the current chairman, shall I say, unless things go drastically wrong, they're not going to be in the mould of sacking everyone all the time because they don't want to spend money. And I don't know if people know this, but when you sack a manager, you have to pay up their whole contract. Unless, obviously, I mean, it doesn't work the same as the real world, mainly because we don't have contracts in our jobs in the real world. But they just won't want to spend that money, basically. So I think as long as if they're building, but maybe, I don't know, come in top 4 2 out of 3 years, I can't see them being sacked. I can see them being given time, but it's what they do with that time and what we see as a success and what the board sees as success. Again, remember that Kroenke probably only sees success in terms of banknotes. So if a manager comes in and we deem them unsuccessful, but the money keeps rolling in and the money grows, then he's probably hit his targets in terms of what is set from his boss in terms of Kroenke. Kroenke pretty much seems to only care about money. So if a new manager comes in and achieves that, then he could be given a long time, in the same way that a lot of us don't want Wenger to be manager. But in terms of from what he's been set from, not what he's been set from his boss, but what he's providing for his boss, he's more than happy with him, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's a very, very subjective question in that regard because, I mean, of course, it also depends on, what you touched upon are some of the more overarching factors, but it also depends on specifics. What I mean by that is that if you have someone like an Ancelotti coming in, they would arguably get a shorter contract, I would imagine, than, let's say a Tuchel, who we expect to stick around for longer and is not just a placeholder. So it's really hard to assess that way, and the goals that would be set by the club are obviously going to be different than what fans want. That's just the way Arsenal Football Club is owned and managed. So I think it's a very tough question, but it makes for interesting discussion. Maybe we'll come back to these when we do have a new manager, and discuss how we project things for the future.
Okay. So the next question, if I've not skipped any, as I said, we're in different orders, is from Red_Fulcrum. Milan didn't play like our friend from the podcast predicted. They gave our creative players so much space. What happened? Do you think Wenger outsmarted Gattuso, or did Milan underestimate our level of performance, our capable level of performance?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think they underestimated. I think they saw where we were struggling, which was scoring goals, and they doubled down on their defenders. I mean, they of course have Bonucci, who is capable of wonderful things. I was also sort of impressed by Romagnoli. I love a left-footed center back, and I thought he was very good in breaking that first line of the Arsenal defense and finding a ball into midfield for Bonaventura or Biglia if he was venturing further forward. But when it came to us attacking, I think Gattuso and his assistants, his staff, thought that their defenders would be enough. Their four-man midfield with maybe Biglia dropping deeper and pressurizing would be enough. And they didn't give us enough credit, I feel, which is fair because in the past month we've been very, very handicapped in that sense. So I think it was a case of them doubling down on our misgiving and us actually being able to shed that misgiving. So it worked out really well in that regard. And I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with us outsmarting them. I think we just found our groove. Sometimes things click, and when you have players like Mesut Ozil in the team and Henrik Mkhitaryan, then they will find the attacking space. They will find the dangerous spots, and they will make the chances count. And that's exactly what we did yesterday.
I'm going to tackle this slightly differently. I think Wenger deserves a bit more credit than he's got, because everyone seemed to think, and I can't remember if I definitely mentioned it to you, but I can't remember if I mentioned it on the last week's podcast. Mm-hmm. I spoke to someone that works for BT Sport who cover Italian football, and then obviously we spoke to Michael from IFTV, and they all thought we was going to be overrun in midfield, and Wenger picked the team to completely combat that. So if that was what was being labelled as their main strength, and Wenger's picked the team to nullify that and to make it null and void, I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I just never placed that much faith in their midfield. I actually did think that our midfield was going to be enough from the beginning. The only question I had was Kessie, because I've not seen him play, and from everything that I read so far, it was all about his strength, all about his ability to win the ball back. And there were instances of that yesterday, but I was expecting more from him. To be honest, I was almost scouting him, thinking that might be someone we could bring on into our team. Romagnoli was another one, because I think Milan need money right now because of their problems with their owners, and we of course need to strengthen in those departments. So I was almost expecting something bright from them, and I didn't see anything that was worthy. But I guess I put that down to them instead of us nullifying that. So
just to again, I'll try and be quick. I haven't seen a lot of them, so I'm only going on what I would say two experts, and they're definitely experts compared to me. And one of them works in the Italian league essentially for BT Sport, and the other one is an ardent Milan fan and runs a very popular fan channel about Italian football. Mm-hmm. So I don't know enough to know if our midfield is better than theirs. I don't think there's many teams with a much better midfield, but when both of these experts tell me they are going to overrun us in midfield, then we pick the team to stop them doing that, and it clearly worked. As I said, I have to give credit to Wenger for that.
Fair enough. Let's end our podcast on that note. Excuse me, my throat is giving me a lot of trouble. But yeah, let's end on that positive note for Arsene Wenger, and a positive result for us. I think most Arsenal fans did not expect us to go to the San Siro and put in that dominant of a performance. And a dominant performance is exactly what it was. We gave City credit for sitting back after getting a 3-0 lead at the Emirates and seeing the game out. That's exactly what we did today. And as Tony mentioned earlier today, that it's a Thursday-Sunday fixture. We need to be very, very smart about how we conserve our energies. We have a little bit of problem with squad depth, so all credit that is deserved to the players, to the manager, to the staff, and a wonderful result. Let's look forward to Sunday, and we host Watford at the Emirates. We've spoken about that before, but let's hope we can get a decent result out of that. We will be back with you on Monday. I think that would be fair to say, and hopefully Tez will be joining us as well. Before we part, any other comments, Tony?
Yeah, just two things. One, thank you if you're all still listening, because I know we've rattled on a bit. Hopefully we've been somewhat insightful. We will be having some giveaways soon. We're just sorting them out now. So all you people that managed to hang on into minutes 120 of the podcast, we will be looking to reward you soon. And secondly, I seem to be doing these quiz questions and then forgetting about them for a week. And some people are asking for them. So I've got one today.
Oh, fantastic.
There are 4 players who have made first team appearances for both AC Milan and Arsenal. Who are they? And Schwinn, if you have an answer off air.
Jesus Christ.
For the obvious reasons.
We'll save that for air, because I don't want to embarrass myself. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. As always, this is, well, not as always, but for the past couple of weeks, this is Schwinn. And on behalf of Tony, goodbye and have a wonderful weekend.